Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey, and you can never outdo God. We're going to be talking about that, humility, and generosity with Debbie Giorgianni and Adam Blai this morning on The Next Right Thing. Good morning, Deb and Adam.
Good morning, Keith. Thank you so much. We love doing The Next Right Thing and opening up the phone lines for our listeners to weigh in on this topic. So if you have something to say about almsgiving, generosity, like you said earlier, Keith, getting over ourselves, I think that is a wonderful topic to talk about, Adam. So the number, let me give the number real quickly, and then Adam and I are going to talk, we're going to be talking about St. Augustine and what he had to say about temptations. And so the number to dial is 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. And you'll speak to Tim. He's our senior producer. He's wonderful to talk to. He'll put you on hold and you can slip right into the discussion. But we do want to hear from you if you have something to say about this topic, but go quickly. Don't wait to the very end of this segment. So Adam, St. Augustine said that there's three major temptations: pleasure, possession, and power. That's where we get prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, right, to combat those temptations. So why don't we go into almsgiving and talk about this idea that you cannot outdo God in generosity?
Sure. So this is one way to break down, temptation into kind of three parts. And when we think about possessions, it's, I think what the scripture and what St. Augustine would point to is that everything comes from God, right? So we know that we hear that, everything was created for him and through him. And the thanksgiving, the core of it, I think, is first the thanksgiving that we're alive, that we exist at all, which was a free gift given to us by God. We didn't earn it. We didn't exist before we came into being like God has always existed. And we find ourselves here and alive and able to function, enjoying whatever gifts God has given us in the world and in our lives. And so part of what almsgiving is doing is trying to kind of activate and remember that part of Thanksgiving, but it's also there to free us from the attachment to possessions and objects, right? Mm-hmm. So when Jesus, the young man who was wealthy and doing well came up to him and said, Rabbi, I'm following all the commandments, but what do I need to do to attain heaven? And Jesus said, sell everything you own, give it to the poor, and then follow me. And of course, we read then he was dejected and walked away because he was really attached to his possessions, right? That was something that he sounded like from the reading he couldn't overcome. Now, maybe he went on to overcome that. Now, does that mean that Jesus is asking us to literally sell everything we own? No, I don't think the church would teach that. I think what the church would teach is we need to give up our attachment to everything that we own in terms of an undue attachment, meaning making it an idol. So, the first commandment, when it talks about, I am the Lord your God, you'll not have strange gods before me. And another way Jesus interprets that is you love God with your whole heart, your whole mind, and, your spirit. The idea of making possessions into an idol and making them the center of our lives, the motivation of our lives, the reason that we exist and do the things that we do, not to please God, but to get that next object. And so there's two things I think that tie into this idea of defeating the possessions. And another way to think of that is defeating the world, right? So the classic Christian journey: defeat the flesh, defeat the world, and defeat the devil. So, the flesh is the pleasure that Augustine talked about. We defeat that through fasting, through getting the bodily passions under our control as opposed to being controlled by them. And then we try to let go of our attachment to possessions in order to defeat that idolatry, where we start living our life not based on what would please God, but based on what pleases us. And so there's a few ways to approach this, but yes, we are to use our time, talent, and treasures for God, for the kingdom of God and what he's given us to do. But we are not supposed to have like an undue or an inappropriate attachment to money and possessions.
How we practice that is in our everyday life, right? when we are asked to give generously, when we're asked to stretch a bit out of our comfort zone, these are all ways, we talk about this in life coaching. These are ways to practice virtue, to learn and to grow, right? So in coaching, we say practice makes permanent instead of practice makes perfect, right? So we're practicing this. So when God presents these opportunities for us to step out in faith and to stretch ourselves, the interesting thing, Adam, and we don't give to get, right? We don't give to get. But this is how our God works. He's so loving and so amazing that when we step in and give a little, he comes rushing towards us. And people have said that so many times. I mean, too many times to even count, because it's unbelievable how we give a tiny bit. We step towards God, and God just showers us with this abundance and this love. And I'm not saying to test God or to do that to see what God can do, but that's the way our God works when we give from our heart and we really are trying to grow in holiness and in virtue, right, Adam? So what do you say to that? Because today, I think it's very interesting. We're in this world. The economy's, not great. Things are going on in our world, and our church is we've got a lot of division, a lot of problems happening in our families and in our communities. And then here we are in the middle of a spring pledge drive season all around the country for Catholic radio stations all around the country. And we're listener supported Catholic radio. So we have to go to our listeners and ask them for money. And it's happening all across the United States, and people are probably wrestling with that thought, like, what do I do? Should I give? Shouldn't I give? Should I hold on because I might need it for my family? What do I do? What would you say to people as they're struggling to make those decisions, and they want to give, they want to support, but they also want to protect their own being and their own family?
Well, I think people need to do the ministry they've been given in life first. So if somebody is a parent and they need to take care of their family and, plan for their family first, that's a ministry given by God. Mm-hmm. A lot of us have a little bit extra in life, and one way to be supportive of the church and what God is doing in the world is to be supportive of this. And the reason I say that, and I mean this sincerely, I really think the world and the church's evangelization has to move into podcasts and the digital stuff and the internet, because in reality, how many people tune in a physical radio anymore?
Right.
But hundreds of millions of people are listening to podcasts, listening to digital radio all over the world. And this is, if it's not in the phone, it's not going to reach the next generation for the most part. And this, I think, is becoming a really important area for God. And in terms of catechesis, which is what we're all about on the Spirit World, the show that we do on Saturdays, people, I think, for the most part, aren't going to CCD or getting the information they need. A lot of people, younger people, aren't going to Mass. And so this is an area that we have to work in, not only because it needs to be done to keep the faith going and pass it on in a full way, because it's a rich and beautiful faith. It's not just sound bites. But also we need to do it because there are competing kind of worldviews and competing spiritual systems that are jumping on that platform into the digital space. And so we need to provide the good information, because I see the fruits of it when we don't, where people are pursuing other things because they have an innate need for God. And so they're pursuing spiritual experiences. And this is one of the ways that we're getting into that phone so that the young people can hear us and see us and hopefully get good information about the faith. And so it's a real thing.
Yeah. Well, and I've always said this, that I believe God's using the radio airwaves. It's his megaphone. The reason why I know that, Adam, is because we receive messages on the spirit world, and Jerry and I receive messages through Take Two all the time, where people will say they happen to get into the car, or they tripped onto the station, they were scanning, going up and down the dial, they found Catholic radio, God was speaking right to them. You know how many times we've heard that, we've read that email? I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And so God is using any method possible to reach us. And that's why it's so important that we take care of those precious jewels in our midst that we can use to catechize and fully form people in the faith and pass on the faith to the next generation. I couldn't agree with you more. So we're in the midst. I mean, I know so many of us are getting tired, but we want to finish Lent strong, and we're in the home stretch, and it's prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. So we are going to be stretched during this time to see how much we can step out in faith and really give from our hearts and give in a joyful manner, and really do that well and show up and be pleasing to God. Now, do I believe that God is going to shower us with abundance? I do. I really do, because I've seen it. But we don't give to get. We give in faith and trust. And God is God, and that's the beauty. That's the beautiful thing. But we want to ask our listeners on the next segment. We're going to hit the pause button in about a minute, Adam, and then Keith is going to flip it back to us. I'd love to see if we can get one or two folks on the line to ask about when they gave from the heart, when they stepped out in faith. What was the result? What did they learn? How did they grow? Did God show up? What was their experience? So if you have something to say about You Can't Outdo God in Generosity, please call us, 877-757-9424. That's the number to call, and share with us your personal experience. What do you say about that, Adam?
Sure. And I think one thing that I'd be interested to hear is also the spiritual give back that you've received from God, because it's not that prosperity gospel stuff where God is necessarily going to make a transaction with you in dollars. That's not how God generally works, but he is going to give you in his providence what you really need. Absolutely. And that is more longer term, and is generally the more spiritual gifts that we get back for serving him and trying to do his will.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree more.
Deb, we mentioned the prosperity gospel idea in the last segment, briefly there towards the end. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that in terms of the difference between that kind of focusing on the dollars and cents aspect of God as kind of like a financial Pez dispenser, which I think, honestly, a lot of that approach is often aimed at people that are struggling and are looking for God to be kind of a machine that multiplies money, which is, it makes me so angry, that kind of stuff, to be honest. Hearing that over the years. But God gives in so many different ways. It's not about money. And I think a big part of what we're talking about today is not to be attached to possessions and money, but not in the sense that the prosperity gospel talks about it.
Right. So I'm so glad you brought this up, Adam, because I had a wonderful, amazing mentor and pastor many years ago when I was first starting in ministry. And he used to give like a homily on this once a month about prosperity gospel, about the understanding of God, and how to really and truly be generous from the heart, and how God is generous. And he would stress all the time to all of the parishioners, it's about who God is. It's our trust in God, our heart, and our intention, and what our motivation is. That's what we're responsible for, and we're responsible for trying to know who God is, right? And if we have that Tim called it earlier radical reliance. I love when he was talking about that, about prayer, that radical reliance, that, we surrender. We totally trust. Jesus, I trust in you. We really focus on our genuine intention and who God is, when that meets, there is an amazing experience that happens, whether it is something that is that you can touch, like something like a blessing of maybe some financial something or something like that, or a relationship or something of that nature, or a spiritual blessing or an emotional healing. It's so incredible. Why do I say that? Because when I was first in ministry, I struggled with this, Adam. I loved these televangelists on TV that would talk about, hey, do this and say this prayer and you'll get this. And it really is addicting. And this pastor taught all of us how to really trust in God and who God is, because Jesus said, I came for you to have life and to have it to the full. What does that mean? It means abundance. Because our God is a big God. He's not a small God. He's a big God. And so if we focus with that pure intention, God is God and we do our part. And when it comes together in a very authentic way, it does produce blessings and graces. Now, we may not be able to say, well, it's going to be this or that, or you're going to get $1 million, or you're going to get a house or whatever. But it just happens because that's who our God is. So if you think about it like that in a bigger way, then the trust goes up for God, the confidence goes up for God, and your relationship is deepened with God. So I don't know if that helps at all, but that's how I learned it when I was first in ministry, and it forever changed the way I saw things. And I have to tell you, it has always shown up in an abundant way.
You know, Deb, as you were talking, it was making me think of my own life. And one thing that I've really come to understand and really trust in my own journey is that the more I try to say yes to God in terms of what He's put in front of me, in terms of tasks or opportunities to work on things, the more I say yes to Him, the more I feel some stability in my life growing or being built. And it's not that it's affluence, but He provides what's needed, for me at least.
Yes.
And it's not about, getting power or anything like that, but providing, in my case, just enough to do what He needs done in this life. And I now realize with a little bit of age that, for me at least, He works with each of us based on our own personalities. That's best because, being humble in the sense of not getting attached or pursuing wealth is important. But you know what has happened along the way, Deb? Even in the years where things have been lean and I've been working very hard and trying to do these things that aren't normally done by a layperson, but God opened the door to them, even in years that have been a struggle, I still find myself suddenly, here I am in Rome, and this bishop has flown me over for this meeting, and I'm having this gorgeous meal, next to St. Peter's, and it's so surreal. Right. Where I find myself in another country in some gorgeous cathedral, with my friends saying Mass there, and, just unbelievable experiences that I never would have dreamed that I would be able to have, and they just happen, and I find myself there. And so it's not been about God giving a lot of money for me to make a choice about what to do with it, but He's given a wealth of life and a wealth of friendships, of special people and knowledge and experiences that's been unbelievable. Right. And if I had been handed, the dollar bills and said, go do what you want with it, I wouldn't have figured these things out. I wouldn't have made those happen.
But Adam, your example, your personal example, that's God being God. That is because it's not that you were looking for it, but that is God being God. So there's the prosperity right there.
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
There is prosperity with God, but it's not the human prosperity that we think of.
Right. Amen to that. Okay, we have Patricia on the line from Odessa, Texas, waiting so patiently, listening on KLPF. And Patricia, welcome to The Next Right Thing.
Good morning. Good morning. I just want to share with you, I feel strongly in what you are sharing this morning, joy, that really sometimes it has to do with our own fear And I think part of our human DNA is that we just think what we have is ours, and we are a success unto ourselves, and we forget that really we're called to be great stewards of what has been given to us. And so whether it's the next breath we take or a bonus or whatever it is, it's really being a great steward and trusting. Yes, like you said, Debbie, just really trusting. One of my favorite scriptures is 1 John 4, 18, and that is, there's no fear if it really is love. And so I just feel that we tend to just over-dramatize, including myself, our trials or tribulations, and we forget that, God will never fail us. That's his promise. He keeps the promise. We're the ones that don't. But that's my input this morning, and I'll hang up. And just again, God bless you both.
Oh, thank you, Patricia. Patricia, you nailed it. Home run. Way to go. I mean, didn't Patricia? She was spot on with this. We cannot. John Paul II. Be not afraid. Okay, God is not. He doesn't know fear. Okay, we serve a big God. So our role is to truly trust, like Patricia was saying, and step out in faith and trust God more, and it builds our relationship. What do you say to that, Adam?
Yeah, exactly. God, you'll see it more when you look back on things in the midst of things. You don't always understand why things are happening the way they are. At least in my life, this has been my experience. But then as time goes on and I look back and I say, oh, he was setting this up and he was setting this up and he was putting this in place so that this could happen. And that trust is huge. It is so important in our relationship with Jesus. And I think when we trust and abandon ourselves into his arms, into his heart, that to me is when really interesting and good things happen in life.
Amen to that. That's why we always say, Jesus, we trust in you. Okay, we got to make room for Sissel Anderson. She's got something to share with us, very important about the fruits of the Spirit. So we're going to send it back to Keith, and we'll see everyone, God willing, tomorrow.
Great. Thank you so much, Debbie and Adam, and also Patricia for calling in. That was great. That helped me because I never over-dramatize my tribulations. Never. That's a joke. Today, coming up next, we've got faithfulness and the God of convenience. We're going to be talking a little bit about that fruit of the Spirit, faithfulness, on fruitful living with Sissel Anderson. So stay tuned right after this break for more Morning Joy, where truth matters. We'll see you right after this break.
You're listening to Morning Joy, where truth matters.